Hello everybody, this is Ace Clubs coming back at you. This is going to be part 2 of my painting my Death Guard competition model. I went ahead in between the last video that you saw for this with the airbrushing, and I tried to kind of do another video, and just doing the actual video work I found very difficult here, and so a little bit of that footage was lost, just kind of unusable while I did a lot of the metallics. This setup isn't perfect, but I think it came out a lot better than the initial attempt was on it. So what I'm doing here is laying down a coat on the actual base of the model. I'm using a color, you'll see me show it a little bit later, called Vallejo Wood Grain. It kind of goes on a lot more orangey than it dries. It dries a very, very dark brown. I think it went pretty well with the look I was going for, which is the base kind of already looks like it. It's got a very kind of muddy, broken terrain look to it. So I figured I'd go ahead and try a kind of just a basic mud base and add a couple of little flocking that I have to it later, just to not detract from the colors on the model. I really want the model himself to be the focal point, and then the base just kind of add is kind of like a backup to him. I'm using that same wood grain color on his little wooden forestock for the barrel. I just figured, color cohesion, I just use the same one, just out of simplicity as well. So you'll see me, I'm going to go ahead and switch to a different color now for Mechanicus Standard Gray. I will continue to go back to the base on that wood grain. I just have to wait for it to dry, and it's easier for me to just move on to a different color in a different part of the model while it does that. So what I'm using the Mechanicus Standard Gray for is, I noticed that on his thigh plate he's got this hose that's kind of dripping an ichor, like some kind of a sludge onto his thigh, and you'll see me kind of find this hose throughout the model. It kind of ends here and starts on his chest, and I just haven't noticed that yet. As I end up painting the model, I kind of find more and more different bits of detail that I didn't notice before. Just like his little belt, I haven't fully noticed that 100% yet. So you'll see me, I kind of go back and forth on the model, and I'm sure it can be probably a little distracting for you guys, but just part of my process. So I'm using that same Mechanicus Standard Gray as an edge highlight on his little pieces of rubber on the behind his knees. I just figured, again, might as well do it while I'm here. It's a nice match, I think. Just something, again, high contrast for that model. So I'm switching now to a color called Night Questor Flesh. I'm going to be doing the head of the model here. The model, I kind of wanted to go with already a shadow color to the skin to go down first, just so I could always brighten it up from here. I also really like the coverage on this paint, and I knew I needed to have a strong coverage for that, to go over that super bright green that I laid down on it earlier. So this is a very nice flesh tone. It's quite neutral to cool, I would say, in terms of color temperature. But I go ahead and I brighten up a little bit later using a couple of other different paints. I kind of end up, I'll start with one color, and then I might add a highlight on my wet palette, and just kind of blend them on the palette to create a mid-tone instead of breaking out 3 different paints. I do a lot of that, creating some different colors instead of just using single tones. But kind of to start with, I typically go dark and then lighten it up from there. So I'm going back at that base again using the wood grain. I noticed that the base had dried, so I'm gonna go ahead and add a second coat. It's always good, you know, to do 2 thin coats instead of 1 super thick coat. The model looks a lot cleaner, you get better coverage. I'll be honest with you, a lot of the times as well, I find that the paint really does a lot of work in assisting me to be a better painter. When I lay down a nice thin layer, it lays kind of in certain ways that I didn't really imagine it to, and the way that it kind of covered those, you'll see in later, there's these kind of grenades that are in the mud, and the way that it covered it, I was able to kind of paint it later to really create an effect, I think, that makes it look like those grenades had kind of sunk into the mud, and you know, the dirt effect was quite nice onto them. So again, cleaning up again and adding more of that wood grain color to that stock. So right now, I've kind of noticed these kind of pustules on the model, and I knew I needed an interesting color to pick for it. And so I chose a Vallejo game color called Filthy Brown. It's kind of in between a yellow, an orange, and a brown color. It's a very interesting color, and I knew I needed to kind of stand out from that yellow green that we kind of put down on the armor. And as soon as I put this on the first pustule, I said, yeah, this is probably going to be the one. This is our main color for these pustules. It just looks so gross. It looks 100% like a pimple you would never want on your face. And so I also used it for that kind of ichor pus that's kind of coming out of the tube. And you'll see me, I'm gonna again kind of look all over the model now, looking for these kind of, you know, buboes, these pustules to kind of add on to it. And I continue to find more and more as I go. It's a really fun process. Like here, I noticed that his little tank on the back had a leak, so I added again some more of that filthy brown color to that area there. But yeah, it stands out. Very nice color, I think. I think it's a really good choice here, especially with that pattern that I've kind of got going on already. So I guess I'll kind of talk about, you know, how it doing brushwork on these models can be, you know, it's one of those things where I want to say it looks a lot easier than it is, although, I mean, kind of getting started, it really is a good idea just to, you know, get started putting, you know, paint on the model and seeing where you're at with it. But you really have to kind of experiment a lot and with pressure, different kinds of pressure that you're putting on the model, and experiment with different colors. Like here, I kind of noticed that he's got these tubes running through his skin, or through his armor, and I kind of thought, well, wouldn't it be neat if I kind of colored the inside of the tube, because it's got these kind of ridged areas. I was like, well, maybe they're clear, maybe the ichor is kind of running all the way through it. And I kind of keep coming back to it later, but I ended up changing it back to just being silver. It just didn't look right, I don't think. And a lot of painting the model is that. It's going to be kind of experimentation, putting some pigment down, deciding if you like it or not. And if you don't, well, you can always just paint right back over it. It's no big deal. You know, as long as you keep your coats thin, really you'll never even notice that you had painted anything on it to begin with. And here's where I kind of noticed that kind of where the tube starts, kind of runs out of his chest up into his neck area, and then next to it there's a little bit more of the dripping kind of ichor that I found, so I'm gonna go ahead and touch that up as well. It's kind of fun as you paint through the model. That I don't know, I keep finding new and different things, more and more details on the model. So right now I'm kind of considering what options I have as far as different kinds of leather colors, and I ended up settling on a color called chocolate brown. It's kind of one step up in color, kind of from that wood grain, so it's going to be kind of a darker leather color, but not nearly as dark as that wood grain, but also kind of, you know, again, neutral, I would say, not bright, not dark, but also a little bit cooler, I would say, in color grade. And I'm going to use this for all of the leather pouches and all the different leather kind of belts, and you'll see me here kind of going across the model, finding everywhere I can find where this kind of belt keeps popping back up. You can kind of see there's a little bit of it that goes underneath one pauldron up there, and that was kind of an interesting one to be able to reach. It's a lot of fun, kind of to again keep finding these additional little details and pick over it. So you'll see here I put just a little bit of that brown on one of his little exhaust pipes. You know, pro tip: if you take a clean brush and just dip it in water, and as long as you do it really quick after you make a mistake, and just take that clean brush with just a little water and run it over that paint, it comes off most of the time. So you can just really quick use it almost like a little magical eraser. But again, that's why we keep the paint really thin to start. There's very, very little, you know, it's mostly water, you know, probably 50-50, I would say, water to paint. That's on the brush at any one time. It's never really thick unless I'm going for a certain effect, because if I do make a mistake, it's easier to clean up. So at this point, I decided I was going to go ahead and start painting his the different horns that are kind of coming in and across the model, and I decided to go ahead and do a mix of what's a Citadel base paint called Xandri Dust and a Army Painter paint called Sulfuric Oxide. That sulfuric oxide just looks phenomenally nasty. I really got it because I thought it was so gross looking, and I figured these horns should be pretty gross coming out of him. They're not going to look just like you know, an elephant tusk or something like that. They need to be really kind of green and gross after they've kind of come up from underneath this poor guy's skin here. So I figured I'd mix these two, see where it ended up, and you'll see me, I kind of go kind of through the model, and through the course of me doing this painting, I add different filters and different washes to it to just try and keep it nice and super gross and grimy on the horn, especially near the bottom section, because I kind of figure like if he's leaking this yellow fluid everywhere, then it's probably going to be coming up near the horn as well, especially at the bottom. Near the top it might kind of dry and you know, look a certain bony color, but definitely near the bottom it's going to look kind of green and you know, yellow and gross. Again, you can kind of see here where I was doing it before. Just to keep my hand as steady as possible, it's always smart to kind of keep as many points of contact between you and the model as possible, or you and, you know, using another hand. So I pushed my finger onto that little drum, and it, again, if you think you have shaky hands, it's phenomenal. Just certain ways of holding the model. It really keeps your hands a lot straighter than you think. You know, yeah, there's certain times where you're just gonna have to breathe, you know, nice and slow while you're doing a model. You're always gonna have kind of nail biting moments, but a lot of that comes down to kind of holding the model properly, keeping your hands braced, and being creative. You know, I use a small little stand with a 360 head to it, so I can hold my hands straight and just take my thumb and spin it at the top, and it spins the model around, and the model's just stuck to that using some blue tack, some kind of, you know, stuff that you would normally put a poster up in a room where you didn't want to nail it. So it's really simple, but it's quite effective because the model's not very heavy. It sticks very nicely. I use the same horn mixture on the little Nurgling's horns. That's what the little guy in the front's called, little Nurgling. So I figured he's going to probably have the same kind of horns that the Death Guard's going to have there. And again, just to keep them nice, solid, cohesive colors. So I'm going back over some of the leather now. Just a nice, you know, chill process. I'm not really thinking too much about the competition. I just want to paint kind of, you know, the best model I can at this moment. So I'm adding the barbarian flesh, and I'm going to go ahead and mix it again with that night quester flesh just to add that mid-tone, because I noticed that the kind of skin was nice and dry, so it was ready for that next mid-tone. And so you'll kind of see me kind of throughout this process, I'll switch it up, add the barbarian flesh, I'll add more night quester flesh, I'll blend it again, you know, add more shadows, add more highlight. It's a, you know, it's a process. It's just, you know, it's not a kind of a simple paint by numbers deal. You kind of paint it, you see where the light's hitting on the model, and you know, you carry on from there. Just like right now, I've kind of noticed that he's got kind of like a metal plate in the back of his head that I've kind of been painting flesh over and over again. And so you'll see me a little bit later, I put some metallics back on the palette, and I'm gonna repaint that to look metallic again, because I kind of didn't notice it at first. So so here, I wanted the Nurgling, you know, normally they're just kind of green and happy, but I wanted this guy to kind of, on his you know, where the skin's probably the tightest and where the highlights were the brightest, I wanted to add kind of a flesh tone to him, where, you know, it's kind of like he is mostly green, but kind of where his joints are and where his lips are, where the, you know, I don't want to say skin because he's a little demon, he really doesn't have blood, but I just figured, you know, it might add an interesting dimension to him where he's not just green, he's, you know, he's got a little bit of warmth to his skin as well. And here I, you know, again, discovering more of those little buboes. I noticed that there's additional ones on the Nurgling as well, so I'm gonna be kind of going back to that same filthy brown color, and then adding a shade to it a little bit later, just to kind of improve how it looks. This is me just adding a little bit of kind of gray as a kind of it's not a full dry brush, so I kind of noticed that there's this little, like, almost like a speaker grill on his back, and what I did was I took just paint, there's no water addition to it, and I kind of just ran the dry brush against that just to kind of highlight it up a little bit and leave the little speaker grill parts as dark as possible. Again, it wasn't just something to highlight it up back there. So here I'm breaking out my two metallics. I use Pro Acryl metallics right now. I like them, but I really hate the bottles that they come in. You would think that these like little pour bottles would be great compared to the GW bottles, but the tips get so nasty every time you use them, because when you pour it, inevitably some of the paint stays in the nozzle, and when you seal them back up, what happens is it just gets pushed to the top, and now you end up with just a rim of nasty paint on the top of it, and you have to pick that off every time you go back to it. So I'm not a big fan of that, but I am a big fan of metallics. They look wonderful. That dark silver is super nice. I rarely, you know, it's almost nice enough on its own without any highlighting, although the silver is pretty striking. It's almost, you know, aluminum bright. So what I'm doing is going through and picking out all of the grenades that I saw on the ground, all the spots on the model that kind of deserved to be silver before that I kind of neglected to paint the first time. You know, it's kind of a process. You go through, you put paint on the model, and then you find out 15 minutes later as you paint it, oh, this also probably should have been that color too. Oh, this also should have been that color. So you end up going back and forth quite a bit, or at least I do. I know I've seen certain people who just seem to be able to know what colors go where. Probably they're better at planning it than I am. And here I went back over that those kind of pipes that were running underneath the armor there, and I reapplied that silver. I just didn't really like how that silver was working out, or that yellow kind of was working out underneath there. I think as an idea it's got some merit, but just the way I did it just didn't work out, you know, just not the right time for that color yet. And now I'm going to go through with the bronze and pick out all of the little rings. I decided that the pins on the grenades should be silver, and the little rings that hold the grenades and hold the pins together should be bronze. I don't know why. It could have been other way around. I just decided it looked good that way. Kind of like, you know, Bob Ross always talks about, sometimes you got to make a decision and just go with it and see where that decision takes you. I'm adding a little bit of bronze to kind of where there was a little round ring around the hose there, kind of where the hose ends up. So I figured, keeping with the theming, that all the fittings kind of on the model, trimming wise, are typically bronze or brass on a death guard. So I kept, you know, that kind of logic, and the chainmail, stuff like that, would be silver. So usually painting the base rim black is kind of a signifier that you're kind of done with the model. I'm clearly not at this point. I just wanted to see what it would look like, and honestly, I needed a win. I'm happy with how the model goes, but it's a process, and sometimes it's just kind of, you know, you just kind of need a win right then and there to look like you did something and you feel really more accomplished. At least I do when that base rim turns black. This is another day, so what I've done in between here and the last time you've seen him is I have gloss coated the model with Vallejo gloss, a couple of coats, in order to lower the surface tension. So I'm going to be using a couple of different shading mediums. I'm using a strong shade, a dark shade, and the quick shade medium. All together from Army Painter, because the quick shade medium adds more fluidity to the actual shading mixture itself, and those two tones add, number one, the darkness, the actual shade that I want, and the strong tone adds kind of a dirt factor. And you'll see as I put this on, normally when you put a shade on, coats everything. But because I've added that gloss coat to it, it doesn't tend to pool on the flat surfaces. It pools in the recesses now and pulls away from the flat. And then I take a brush, the same one I used for the wash, and I coat it in water, and I just run it across the flat surfaces to pull that shade away from my nice pretty colors and push it into the recesses. So it's just a little bit of cleanup to, again, I really don't want to darken down my nice colors all that much, but I do want to get shade in those recesses. And this is, I find, a very efficient way to do it, to gloss coat the whole model and then take that little bit of water and just pull the shade off of the flat surfaces. So kind of, it's kind of hard to tell right now, but you can kind of see the shade's already doing a lot of work. All of the little rivets now have a nice, coffee stain around them. All of the pipes now have a coffee stain showing that shade. All of the little cracks and crevices have this brilliant little dirt to them now. So I really appreciate you guys sticking with me for another one of these videos. It's a new process for me, so if you do have any suggestions, any tips for mounting techniques or how to best film this, I know I apologize, I've been fighting a lot with the autofocus, but I really hope that these videos can be informative and maybe relaxing in their own way. I appreciate you all sticking with me for the process, and I hope you guys enjoy your day or night, whatever it is. I hope you're able to have a good one, and if you are painting along with me, I hope you're enjoying the process just as much as I am. Thank you again, and I hope to see you on part 3 when we end up finishing this guy all out. Thank you very much.